The third principle then is responsiveness. Do we genuinely respond to the needs of society? Here we've got Unilever as an example, where the CEO now, Paul Polman, says he does not believe a company has permission to grow in the future unless it can do that while empowering the poorest communities in the world and reducing the environmental impact. So Unilever plans to double in size and halve their environmental footprint. That's genuinely responsive. What were the pharmaceutical companies doing in 2001? I wonder if anybody can remember. All the big pharmaceutical companies got together and took the South African government to court because the South African government was offering generic drugs at a low cost to save people's lives from HIV and AIDS. Was that a very responsive thing for the pharmaceutical companies to do? Now, clearly they had a business model which required them to protect their patents and have big investments in research and development. But from society's point of view, to deny life-saving drugs to those that need it in order to make profits would just never work. And so they've had to completely change their business model. And now many of the life-saving drugs are provided at low cost or even for free in the places that they need it. Some have gone even further, like GlaxoSmithKline. They've created an open source pool for patents. So they're actually sharing their patents with the world and saying, if you can do something with these, with this research that we've conducted, please take it and do something with it. So it's the open source approach. And then we've got the example of the WTO. You all know the WTO, right? The World Toilet Organization. This was started by a chap called Jack Sim, who's from Singapore. He was hoping the World Trade Organization would take him to court so that he could shine a media spotlight on the issue. And of course, the issue is sanitation. He says, we like to talk about water, but then nobody likes to talk about toilets, when actually, there are 2.6 billion people who don't have proper sanitation. What he did differently, though, is he didn't start a charity, he started a business. The WTO works by selling toilets and other sanitation equipment to the poorest areas in the world. And he had to figure out a business model to make that work. So again, responding to the needs of society, but using business to do that. He's got a great little biography for those that are interested called Simply Jack. The fourth of the 5 principles then is Glocality. This is actually based on a Japanese concept, and it simply means to think global, act local. So it's put together the 2 words, global and local. And I think this is something that Sony, they even trademarked Glocality as a concept. Let's take an example of the Cooperative Group. It's a retailer. So instead of just selling things in their shops, what they did is invested in local farms to provide their produce, so that they wouldn't be shipping in produce from all around the world and having a huge energy and environmental footprint. Let's look at this example of Tom's. This is a guy, an American. Tom's is a shoe company. He was inspired by visiting Argentina, where they make a very simple kind of shoe made from canvas. And he wanted to start that up and sell that in the United States and elsewhere. But he decided he wanted to make a difference in the world at the same time. So what did he do? I don't know if you can see the logo there. It says 1 for 1. For every pair of shoes that you buy that are Tom's shoes, another pair goes to somebody who doesn't have shoes somewhere in the developing world. So it's a different business model, been very successfully from a marketing point of view, and today it's a very successful social enterprise. This example of BHP Billiton, I think, illustrates the difficulty of Glocality very well. I did some work for them when I was still running KPMG's sustainability services in South Africa, And they asked for some advice because they were being rated on a CSR index, which was based in Europe, and they were doing very badly, and they couldn't understand it because they thought they were a very responsible company. So we analyzed this index, and it turned out because it was a European index, you got lots of points if you did energy efficiency, climate action, because that's what we're worried about in Europe. We're very worried about climate issues. You got no points if you were doing public health. And it so happens that most of this mining company's operations are in southern Africa, and they found that half their employees were dying of malaria. And so they had a very successful malaria prevention program, but they got no credit for that on this global index. So you can see they got the local issue right, but they didn't get the global issue right. And we need both. That's the point.